I stood in my empty driveway, staring at the oil stain where Dad's 1955 Chevy had sat for 20 years. My hands shook as I held the bank statement, showing another unauthorized withdrawal. Emma thought she could take everything from me: my truck, my money, my dignity. She had no idea I was about to take back something much bigger. The for sale sign went up that afternoon, and by evening, my daughter's world would crumble, just like mine had. My name is Linda Hartwell, and at 55, I should have been living in my dream house instead of staring at it from across the street like some kind of stalker. But there I was, sitting in my beat-up Honda outside the 3-bedroom home I'd worked 2 jobs to afford, watching my 26-year-old daughter Emma stumble out the front door at 11 in the morning wearing yesterday's clothes and an attitude that could strip paint. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was living in a studio apartment that smelled like the previous tenant's cat, while Emma treated my house like her personal resort. Makes sense, right? Well, not really. But that's what happens when you're a high school English teacher who spent 15 years sacrificing everything for family. Every morning started the same way. I'd drive past what should have been my driveway and see Dad's 1955 Chevy pickup sitting there like a faithful dog, waiting for its owner to come home. That truck meant everything to me. Dad had taught me to change oil in that driveway, showed me how to gap spark plugs under that hood, and shared stories about his own father while we worked on the engine together. The Chevy wasn't just metal and rust. It was 20 years of Saturday mornings, greasy hands, and the only father-daughter time we ever really had. Emma never understood that connection. To her, it was just an old truck taking up space where she could park her BMW. Yes, a BMW she somehow afforded while claiming to be getting back on her feet after her latest career disaster. The financial details never quite added up, but I'd learned not to ask too many questions. Asking questions led to fights, and fights led to weeks of silence that made my studio apartment feel even smaller. Then there were the little things that weren't so little. Emergency credit card uses that weren't emergencies. Borrowed money that never got returned. Phone calls she'd take in another room, her voice dropping to whispers whenever I walked by. The expensive purses, the designer shoes, the restaurant receipts I'd find crumpled in my car after she borrowed it. Each incident came with an explanation that made perfect sense in the moment, but fell apart if you thought about it too hard. But thinking too hard was dangerous territory for me. Thinking too hard meant admitting I'd become the mother who enabled her adult child's bad decisions, because being used felt better than being alone. The truth was, I was terrified of what would happen if I stopped saying yes to everything Emma needed. My father would have seen right through this mess. He'd spent his whole life fixing broken things: engines, relationships, people who'd given up on themselves. Linda, he used to say while we worked on the Chevy, some folks will take everything you're willing to give, and then they'll ask for more. The trick is knowing when to close the toolbox and walk away. I never thought those words would apply to my own daughter. The warning signs had been flashing for months, like hazard lights on a dark highway, but I kept driving straight ahead anyway. Emma's mood swings, the defensive anger whenever money came up, the way she'd disappear for hours without explanation, then return home acting like nothing had happened. Most telling of all was how she'd started treating the house, and me, like we both owed her something. What I didn't know was just how much she thought I owed her. That Tuesday morning in October, everything changed. I'd finished my early prep period at school and decided to swing by the house to grab some papers I'd left in my old office. The street looked normal. The neighbors were at work. Even Mrs. Peterson's ancient poodle was doing his usual patrol of the front yard. But when I turned into the driveway, my heart stopped completely. The space where Dad's truck should have been sitting was nothing but an oil stain and empty asphalt. I stared at that empty driveway for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My brain kept trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe Emma had taken it to get gas. Maybe she'd driven it to the store. Maybe there was some perfectly reasonable explanation that didn't involve my worst fears coming true. But deep down, I already knew. The way my stomach dropped told me everything I needed to know about what had happened to Dad's truck. I called Emma's phone 5 times before she finally answered. Her voice had that careful, controlled quality she used when she was about to lie to me. "Oh, hey Mom, what's up? Where's the truck, Emma? What truck?" The pause was too long, way too long. Dad's Chevy. It's not in the driveway. Oh, that. It's getting repaired. The engine was making weird noises, so I took it to a shop. Now here's the thing about growing up with a mechanic for a father. You learn to spot car-related lies from a mile away. That engine had been purring like a contented cat the last time I'd driven it. I'd changed the oil myself 3 weeks earlier. The timing belt was new. The transmission had been rebuilt just last year. Which shop? I asked. Another pause. You wouldn't know it. It's this place downtown. Emma, I want the name of the shop. Mom, why are you being so paranoid? It's just getting fixed. You'll have it back in a few days. That's when I knew she was lying through her teeth. I hung up and drove straight to the house. Emma was waiting for me in the kitchen, arms crossed, looking like I was the one who'd done something wrong. She'd changed clothes since that morning and put on makeup, which meant she'd been expecting this conversation. We need to talk, I said. About what? I already told you the truck is fine. Cut the crap, Emma. Where is it? Her whole demeanor shifted. The fake concern melted away, replaced by something cold and defensive. I sold it. Those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. I actually had to grab the counter to keep from falling over. You what? I sold it to a collector, some guy who specializes in classic trucks. He paid good money for it. The casual way she said it made everything worse, like she was talking about selling a toaster or an old lamp instead of 20 years of memories and the only connection I had left to my father. How much? My voice came out as a whisper. $25,000. $25,000 for a truck that was priceless to me but apparently just another asset to liquidate in Emma's world. Emma, that truck wasn't yours to sell. Technically, it was parked at my house. Your house? Your house? The anger finally broke through. That's my house, Emma. I've been letting you live there while you get back on your feet, and you've been there for over a year. Whatever. Look, I needed the money, okay? I'm in some financial trouble, and this was the fastest way to solve it. Financial trouble. That explained the mysterious phone calls and the expensive purchases that didn't match her supposed income. But it didn't explain the complete lack of remorse on her face. What kind of financial trouble? I asked. Credit cards, some gambling debts. It's complicated. How much do you owe? It doesn't matter now. The truck money covered most of it. Most of it. Which meant $25,000 hadn't even been enough to solve whatever mess she'd gotten herself into. Emma, we have to get it back. Call the collector. Explain the situation. Maybe he'll sell it back to us. She actually laughed. Mom, that's not how this works. The guy already has the title. It's done. But you didn't have the right to. I had the keys. I had access to it. What was I supposed to do? Let my credit get destroyed because you're emotionally attached to some old truck? Some old truck. Those words echoed in my head like a gunshot. To her, 20 years of Saturday mornings with my father meant nothing. The hours he'd spent teaching me about engines, about life, about fixing things that seemed beyond repair. All of that was just sentimental nonsense getting in the way of her financial convenience. You need to get over it, Emma continued. I needed the money more than you needed some rusty old truck. That's when something inside me finally snapped. Not in a dramatic, explosive way. More like the quiet sound of a cable breaking under too much weight. I looked at my daughter, this person I'd sacrificed everything for, and realized I was staring at a stranger. But I wasn't done discovering just how much of a stranger she'd become. That evening, I went back to my studio apartment and started digging through my financial records. Bank statements, credit card bills, account summaries. Everything I'd been too trusting or too scared to examine closely before. The pattern was there, clear as day, once I knew what to look for. Small withdrawals from my checking account that I'd assumed were errors. Charges on my credit cards for things I'd never bought. My savings account balance was lower than it should have been by several $1,000s. Emma hadn't just sold my father's truck. She'd been systematically stealing from me for months. The unauthorized account access. The forged signatures on checks I'd found and dismissed as bank mistakes. The times she'd borrowed my purse and spent just a little too long in the bathroom with it. All of it suddenly made perfect sense. I called the bank the next morning. The customer service representative walked me through 6 months of suspicious activity. Nearly $8,000 in unauthorized transactions. Money transferred from my savings to accounts I'd never opened. Credit card charges for cash advances I'd never requested. "Ma'am, this looks like identity theft," the representative said. "You'll need to file a police report." Identity theft, committed by my own daughter. The person I'd raised, supported, and enabled for 26 years had been stealing from me like I was just another mark in some financial scam. But here's what really broke my heart. Emma had to have known exactly what she was doing. Every stolen dollar, every forged signature, every lie about the truck, all of it was calculated, planned. She'd looked at her mother and seen nothing but an easy target. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by bank statements and receipts, and something fundamental shifted inside me. The gentle, self-sacrificing mother who'd spent years making excuses for Emma's behavior was done. Finished. She'd been replaced by someone who finally understood that love doesn't mean letting people destroy you. I picked up my phone and called a real estate agent. It was time for Emma to learn what real consequences felt like. The real estate agent, Patricia, came over the next afternoon. She was one of those efficient women who wore sensible shoes and carried a briefcase that had seen more houses than a postal worker. I liked her immediately. "Current market conditions are favorable for sellers," she said, walking through what Emma still thought was her personal kingdom. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, established neighborhood. We could list this at $420 and probably get multiple offers. Emma was at work, or at least that's where she claimed to be going these days. Hard to know what was true anymore, but her absence gave me the perfect opportunity to get things rolling without drama. "How quickly could we close?" I asked. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Someone's in a hurry." "You could say that. With the right buyer, maybe 30 days. I know an investor who specializes in quick closings, cash deals. He usually offers about 10% under asking, but there's no financing hassles. 10% under asking meant I'd lose some money, but what I'd gain was worth every penny." We signed the listing agreement that afternoon. Patricia assured me the lockbox would be installed the next morning, and she already had 3 showings lined up for the weekend. The woman didn't mess around. Meanwhile, Emma continued her routine like nothing had changed. She came home that evening with shopping bags from Target and a pizza she'd probably charged to one of my credit cards. The casual entitlement was almost impressive in its audacity. "How was work?" I asked, testing the waters. "Fine. Same old stuff." She didn't even look up from her phone. Same old stuff. Right. I was beginning to wonder if Emma even had a job, or if that was just another lie in her growing collection. But here's the thing about keeping secrets. It's harder than you think. Every time Emma made a snide comment about my cheap studio apartment, I wanted to tell her exactly how temporary our current arrangement was. When she left dishes in the sink for 3 days straight, I bit my tongue instead of mentioning that her housekeeping skills would need improvement real soon. The hardest part was watching her treat my house like her personal kingdom, while knowing she had no idea the kingdom was about to vanish. Patricia called the next evening with news. "We've got an offer already. The investor I mentioned came in at $380. Cash, 30-day close. $380,000. Less than asking, but clean and fast." "I'll take it," I said without hesitation. "Don't you want to think about it? Maybe wait for other offers?" "No, let's do this." The paperwork moved faster than Emma's lies unraveled. Within a week, we had a signed purchase agreement and a closing date set for exactly 28 days out. The buyer even agreed to let Emma have 30 days after closing to vacate, which Patricia said was generous. Generous. That's one word for it. During those 3 weeks, Emma continued her performance. She borrowed my car and returned it on empty, used my Netflix password to buy movies without asking, even had the nerve to suggest I should get a better apartment since I was clearly struggling financially. The irony was delicious. Then came the morning Emma discovered the sold sign in the front yard. I was sitting in my Honda across the street, just like old times, when she came flying out the front door in her pajamas. The look on her face was everything I'd hoped it would be. Confusion, then panic, then that familiar anger she used whenever reality didn't match her expectations. She called me 17 times before I answered. "What the hell is that sign doing in the yard?" "Which sign?" My voice was perfectly calm. "The soldie? Sign, Mom. Don't play dumb with me." "Oh, that. I sold the house." The silence on the other end was worth every sleepless night I'd spent in that cramped studio apartment. "You can't sell the house. I live here." "Actually, I can. It's my house." You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. And that's when Emma's world finally crumbled, exactly like mine had the day she sold Dad's truck. The screaming started immediately. Emma went through every emotion in her playbook: tears, rage, bargaining, threats. She promised to pay me back for the truck, swore she'd get a better job, even offered to move out if I'd just cancel the sale. Too little, too late. "You can't do this to me," she sobbed into the phone. "Actually, I can." And I did. Within days, Emma's carefully constructed house of cards began collapsing. Turns out when you're living rent-free in someone else's house, you don't bother building real financial stability. Who knew? Her creditors started calling when she couldn't make minimum payments without access to my bank accounts. The BMW got repossessed on a Tuesday. I watched from my studio apartment window as they loaded it onto the tow truck. Emma stood in the driveway screaming at the repo man like it was his fault she'd been gambling away money that wasn't hers. The final showdown came on moving day. Emma had found a tiny apartment across town, the kind of place I'd been living in while she enjoyed my 3-bedroom dream home. Justice has a sense of humor sometimes. She tried one last guilt trip. "Dad would be ashamed of you for doing this to family." That hit different than she expected. "You're right," I said. Dad would be ashamed. He'd be ashamed that his granddaughter sold his truck to pay gambling debts. He'd be ashamed that she stole from her own mother. But mostly, he'd be proud that I finally stopped letting people walk all over me. Emma left that afternoon with whatever fit in her friend's pickup truck. No tearful goodbye, no apology, just anger that her free ride was over. I moved back into my house 3 days later. The first thing I did was change every lock. The second thing was sit in the driveway where Dad's truck used to be. I never got the Chevy back. That collector probably has it in some climate-controlled garage, admiring the chrome bumper Dad and I polished so many Saturday mornings. But I got something more valuable: my self-respect. Emma and I don't talk anymore. She sends angry texts sometimes, usually when her rent's due. I don't respond. My house feels bigger now, even though it's the same square footage. Funny how much space you gain when you stop letting people steal your peace along with your money. Some lessons cost $25,000 and a daughter, but finally learning to say no, priceless.